Alright you guys, this is part 2 of the 3-part Q&A that I told you guys I'd be doing. I'm going to probably drop the 3rd part next week, so keep submitting your questions. For those of you that have been asking and don't know where to submit your questions to, you could submit your questions in any comment section on the website. As long as they're there, we'll find them. So let me get straight to it. The Martin 9400 wants to know, what happens when it's discovered that someone in good standings associates with dropouts? It all depends on the circumstances and the exact reasons why this individual was fraternizing with someone who's in bad standings. Usually something like this will result in discipline and a verbal tongue lashing. But this varies depending on status, whether or not this is an ongoing problem, and the exact nature of the interaction. The more status you have, the less latitude you have, and the higher standards you're held to. If it happens behind the walls, it could result in something as simple as a warning or other forms of discipline. If it happens again, it could result in something like having to write a couple 1,000-word essays and having to do a couple 122-count burpees, if you can do them. The severity will increase with each time they're caught. If it happens on the streets, it could result in monetary fines or some other form of discipline, such as owing cleanup or something like that. Again, brother, it just depends, and every scenario is different. I've actually had to deal with this myself in San Quentin. I used to catch some of the homies associating with some of the DOs on the first tier because they had tobacco when they wanted to smoke. Most of the time, they'd stop after being caught and warned, but there were a few cats in there who thought they were slick and attempted to use conduits to broker their wheeling and dealing. But I'd always catch them because as the RC, it was my job to watch out for these kinds of things. The homies used to tell me I had elephant ears. On one rare occasion, there was actually a C who kept getting caught with a known DO on the streets because they were family and this DO was a hitter. He was a solid dude that was liked by a lot of people out there. Even though he was in bad standings, he was still liked and respected by a lot of people. But unfortunately, these are policies that can't be broken, and it almost cost this C his career. I'm not going to put his name out there, but he's a solid C, and he's well known in Salinas. I'll just say that much. Josiah Lomas wants to know, did you ever hear of anyone getting sent to the other side, no good yard, just to hit a target? Anything like that? We call these guys sleepers. Sending someone out to a yard to hit a high priority target is something I've heard C's do in the past, but I don't know of a situation where I've seen that happen myself. In retrospect, when I think about the S and Y's and what they require of you in order to get out there, debriefing, I just think that this is something that would have been hard to pull off. That's probably why I've never seen it done. Now, I've heard of situations happening similar to what Mateo from Salinas and Baby Joker from Watsonville did. The yard they were on or went out to wasn't considered a no good yard, but there was a situation where the leadership on a main line had basically all turned into renegades, and someone had to be sent out from the hole as a sleeper, leading them to believe that he was on their side, and then he took out the main instigator when he felt comfortable enough to do it. The Martin 94, again, wants to know, would the son of a dropout be embraced by the NF or would they be rejected? He'd be embraced on his own merits. He wouldn't be held accountable in any way, shape, or form for whatever his father did to get himself in bad standings. Unfortunately, even though he shouldn't be treated any different, he might still be scrutinized out of an abundance of caution, just based on the fact that that's what people do. This applies to other members of your family as well. Father, mother, sister, brother, uncle, aunt, etc., etc. If you have family that's in hot water for whatever reason, and you're not involved in any way, shape, or form, this shouldn't have an adverse effect on you at all. As long as your loyalty's in the right place and you're not holding some type of resentment or bad feelings about it, then you don't have nothing to worry about. Little man Castaneda from Salinas continued to function as an NF member despite the fact that his brother Pablo was in bad standings. He accepted his brother's circumstances for years, and it didn't affect his standings. However, when he was put on the spot and he failed to honor the green light that was placed on Pablo, it ended up costing him his life. Little man is the one squatting down wearing the glasses in the picture above. And of course, that's him laying in the ditch with his brains blown out. So Cry P wants to know, what's the scariest situation you were in during your gang career? I'd have to say that the scariest time for me was when I got into a shootout with SFPD after hitting an appliance store with another C. It wasn't the actual shootout that scared me, it was hiding and worrying about getting busted that had me spooked. This particular store that we hit was a fence that was owned by some cats that I knew kept a lot of cash on hand. On the day we went to jack these fools, SFPD just so happened to be in the area and pulled up on us as soon as we were coming out. Because we were both holding guns, these fools just started shooting at us. Real shit. There was no warning or nothing. They didn't tell us to drop our weapons. They didn't give us any warning. They just started shooting. Me and the other C ended up getting split up and we took off in different directions. I was able to get into an apartment complex and hide by some garbage cans in a little alley. I hid the gun in the laundry room and stayed there for about 6 hours. They searched that whole neighborhood and came within a few feet of finding me. Real shit. They had their flashlights and they were flashing their flashlights in the area that I was in, but they didn't come down where I was at. I was shaking in my boots because I knew if they found me, I wasn't only gonna get washed up, but they might try to kill me or stomp me out for shooting back at them. SFPD was notorious for that shit back in the day. For those of you who've been in a similar situation, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So Edgar Herrera wants to know, if you were still an active NF member, how do you think your view would be on a YouTube channel like yours? Would you approve or disapprove? This is an easy question to answer. Keeping it 100% honest, I definitely wouldn't approve. I would look at some of these YouTube channels, including mine, like they were poison. Because I mean, let's be honest, all these channels are not only giving up the blueprints and are discussing things that shouldn't be openly discussed, but it's being done on a platform that anyone and everyone is privy to, including law enforcement. If you're telling the truth, even if you're telling the truth and you're dropping good content, someone who's active is gonna look at the individual who's running that channel and say, "Fool, stop telling. You're asking me, so I'm keeping it real with you." I know for a fact that that's how I would have looked at it when I was active. There ain't no splitting hairs, that's just playing with the game. When you're active, one of the things you don't openly talk about is our politics. I guarantee you, there's nobody active out there right now who is pushing one of these YouTube channels and who's dropping the same type of content that some of these channels are dropping. If they are, they're definitely not putting their real identity out there because they get caught up and put on that list. But some people are in denial about what it truly is. The same people that tell everyone that they've never snitched, that they've never told on anyone, and who portray themselves to be a solid righteous individual, or who still portray themselves to be a solid righteous individual. Talking on YouTube about the cause, the struggle, the movement, the NR, the NF, the MA, the history, etc., is giving up info, period. That's what it is. That argument about it all being public knowledge, about it already being known, and all that crap is just a way for them to justify it and make themselves believe that what they're doing is okay. Even if that was true, it doesn't make it okay. If that were true, then this is the standard that they believe in. Since one rat already went in on record and told everyone exactly how someone was murdered, it's okay for the next rat to go in behind them and repeat that same story. The first guy's telling, but the second guy's not. Come on, man. That's called validating and confirming it, or snitching. And for some of these guys that tell everyone that they've never told on anyone, shit, some of these dudes talk so fast, they can't wait to get all that information out. They talk circles around you and generate so much content that you guys can't even keep up with them. Straight naturals, thunder rats. What people need to understand is that there's a lot of other forms of snitching than just getting up on a witness stand and testifying in court. Debriefing, talking to the cops, dry snitching, disseminating information on YouTube. It's all snitching, etc. Think about it this way. Someone does a profile on someone or talks about certain people in their history. Then at some point, law enforcement sees this information on YouTube, because believe me, they're watching. As they often do. Do you really think they're not going to use that information against those individuals if they can? Sure they will, and there's nothing that says they can't. They take all information. So the next time one of these YouTube slicksters tries to sell you that story about them never telling on no one, go ahead and let yourself get a good little laugh while looking right back at the screen and saying, "Fool, you're snitching right now." So Fred Dog wants to know, talk about the Corcoran shoe days and the fights. Were you in any? Do you know Diablo? Was he a beast like he states in his interviews? Since this is a compound question, I'm going to answer each one of your questions separately. What I'll say about the Corcoran shoe days is that it separated the real ones from the fake ones. All those individuals who talked themselves up, who got themselves involved in a lifestyle that they weren't built for, or tried acting hard, but were really cowards, got exposed in Corcoran days. Corcoran exposed them all. It takes a certain type of individual to pop up every morning and to go get himself mentally and physically ready to go out to a yard and fight under a gun, not knowing what fate had in store for you. I mean, I went out there every time they came to my door for yard, and I knew at the very least I was going to take 2 or 3 hits from that Bertha or that knee knocker, the gas gun. Because my policy back then was not to hit the deck until they racked that Mini 14, or not to get down until the other individual that I was getting off with got down first. Every morning they had the same routine. Besides the regular gunner in the tower, there used to be a trigger happy sergeant that would also grab a knee knocker and shoot as soon as the door opened. So you'd get hit twice as soon as it was on. So I knew all this every day before going out. But then there's the unknown. You don't know what's gonna happen. Sometimes you don't know who you're going to yard with until the last minute. Most of the cops there were placing bets on this, and they'd even tell you this when they were escorting us out. If they really wanted to get dirty, they could even walk you over to another building and throw you out on another yard. I've been out there on the yard alone, and then at another time I had a cellie and we both went out together. Sometimes dudes would come in, go out for 1 or 2 yards and then say, "Fuck that, I'm done. I ain't going out there to get killed." I seen it with my own 2 eyes, man. In order to go out to the yard, you had to be up, ready, and your light had to be on. The light was the biggest thing, and that's how you could tell who was going, who stopped, or who just had no interest in going. Eventually I had a routine. I go out, get off, get written up, plead guilty, and then go right back out. You had to plead guilty at your 115 hearing too. If you didn't, it would prolong the whole process and you wouldn't make it out to the next yard. Looking back on it now, I had a lot of good fights. Anyone who said they won them all is lying, because most of the time it went undecided unless you knocked somebody the fuck out. If you didn't get to finish because you're getting shot at or they stopped it, you can't say it's a win. You might have been getting the best of someone at the time you laid down, but that's not a decisive win. As far as Diablo, I'm assuming you're referring to Diablo from Tracy, Dimas de Leon, since you didn't specify. I'll just say this, he was like anyone else who was going out there. I wouldn't call him a beast though. If that's what he was calling himself, that's his opinion. But he wasn't doing nothing different from the rest of us. He was a good dude though, and at the end of the day, that's all that matters. So Rome wants to know, can you give some background on 19th and Mission, more specifically how they originated? What years did they start to make a presence? For those of you that don't know, he's basically asking about a Sureño neighborhood in San Francisco. Probably the biggest Sureño set out there. So before 19th and Mission became a Sureño neighborhood out there wasn't really any other gangs out there that were claiming 19th. In the 80s, it was a well-known dope spot for a lot of paisas who used to congregate and sell their dope at. From 16th and Mission all the way up to 20th, there was nothing but paisas out there selling one-on-ones. At that time, there were no Sureños out there. The closest thing you had to a Sureño that you seen out there at that time were cats who were claiming Mara Salvatrucha. And these guys were up more towards 20th and Mission. They used to kick it by this donut shop on the corner. Anyway, a 1-on-1 was a balloon that had a $10 bag of coke and a $15 bag of heroin in it. Everybody was speedballing that ether-based cocaine back in those days, John Belushi's, and between 16th and 19th was where it was at. So I say sometime around late 1990, early 91 is when there began to be a small presence of homegrown sureños out there. Between 19th and Valencia Street, there was a small alley called Lexington where a family of paisas lived. I don't personally know their history or where they were from, but it was these guys that began to identify themselves as sureños. In '88, I was already in prison doing my first bid, but when I came home in '92, they were already out there established on 19th and Mission. Before this, my hood used to beef with Eastside Daly City, Excelsior Park, EPG, Southeast, 22nd Street Hogs, and other Norteño hoods. But that all changed when 19th Street formed. My hood was on 24th, so we were only 5 blocks away from these guys. When I came home in '92, that conflict was already in full motion. Either we go down there or they come up to 24th. One thing I'll say about them dudes is that they were game when it came to banging. I could run you through 1,000 stories, but I'll just say this. There were times when we'd just be posted up chilling right there on 24th and Mission, and all of a sudden, a bus would pull up, the 14 Mission, and around 20 to 25 of them cats would just come smashing off the bus out of nowhere, and it would be on. But it was tit for tat. There was shit happening out there all the time. One thing them cats were notorious for was catching homeboys slipping that would be riding the bus, the 14 Mission. If you were a broke ass cat that was out there catching the bus and they spotted you on the bus going past 19th, they'd run after the bus, jump up on the back of the bus and pull the electric cable off the track to stop the bus. Some of the buses out there in Frisco are electric, so if you take the cables off the track, the bus would lose power and stop. Then they come up on the bus and spank your ass. That should pretty much answer your question, but from what I've heard, the Mission District is nothing like it used to be. The city cleaned it up, and 19th Street is a ghost town now. So KK Sosa wants to know, what's going on with the Fed-State beef? Any news on that situation? Honestly, nothing different from what I last told you. That beef won't be laid to rest until more blood gets spilled. The feds are not going to stop pursuing their agenda until they prevail, period. If and when I hear something else, you guys will be the first to know about it. But what I do want to say about that whole situation is this. Those of you who have taken an interest in that whole Fed-State conflict or just with politics that continue to develop within the federal and state prison systems, don't put all your faith in what you hear on YouTube, and don't allow YouTube to be, for lack of a better term, your one-stop shop. Those of you who are active and who remain in good standings owe it to yourselves to follow up and cross-check whatever you hear on YouTube, especially when it's something of that magnitude. And I'm not telling you guys nothing you don't already know, but there's just too many people putting their hands in the cookie jar right now. People have agendas. It's as simple as that. At the end of the day, you guys are going to do what you guys are going to do, and you're going to believe what you're going to believe. I'm simply just trying to look out for you so that you don't buy into the false propaganda, the bogus info, and all the other misleading information that's being generated right now. I'm even telling you not to believe me. I'm simply saying that before you give any real credence to anything you might hear on YouTube, to just follow up with those who are still active and who should have access at all that same information before you just believe it first. Unless you don't mind going for the banana in the tailpipe. And I'm not saying that everything you hear on YouTube is embellished or fabricated either. All I'm saying is that when it comes to politics, consider the source and double check it before you just take it for face value. Enough said. So Greg Diaz wants to know, growing up or even in your later years, were you into boxing? I know you had a lot going on with your name. I know for sure you knew how to box or kept at it. If so, who was your favorite boxer and which style of the sweet science did you most emulate? Yes, I've always been into boxing. I'm not like some of these other cats who proclaim to be a boxer simply because I've seen all 20 episodes of Rocky. I not only took a personal interest in it myself when I was a youngster, Newman's Gym, but I also watched boxing when boxing was really boxing. I grew up watching top-ranked boxing with fighters like Donald Curry, John the Beast Mugabe, Tommy Hearns, Aaron Pryor, Alexis Arguello, Ray Ray Boom Boom Mancini, Hector Macho Camacho, and Sugar Ray Leonard are just a few from that era who come to mind. And then years later, my favorite of all time has to be Iron Mike Tyson. Emulating, he came years later after I stopped boxing, but I'd have to say Mike Tyson with Floyd Mayweather's footwork and his ability to slip punches. So Boss Player wants to know, why isn't SF an NF stronghold? It's the bigger city compared to the little ones the NF has. This is a question that I've been asked several times. You're absolutely right. San Francisco is a big city, and for all intents and purposes, it should be an NF stronghold. It's actually been one of the strongholds in the past, but there's a few reasons why the NF hasn't been successful at maintaining control of the city. One of the main reasons why is because of the culture in SF. There's a different culture out there that hasn't really bought into the NF philosophy. The culture out there has been more along the lines of long hair, gold teeth, and everybody making money for themselves. The gangbang mentality is just not as prevalent out there like it is in places like San Jose, Salinas, or the Valley. They're not into what some would call the homeboy culture out there. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of norteños out there, solid ones too, but they're just not on that page. And for whatever reason, there's just not that many homeboys out there from the city that get clicked up with the NF either. They're far and few. A lot of those homeboys out there are on that individual come up for themselves or for the hood. And when you have that mindset, you begin to look at prison gangs like the NF and the NR as interlopers. Guys that don't give a shit about the hood and who put prison politics before their neighborhoods. I'll tell you like this, from the late 80s until the present, I knew every homeboy from San Francisco that became an NF member, and I can tell you this, for as big of a city as SF is, it's not that many. You definitely think there would be more, but that's just not the way it's been. Oh shit, Zab Zuda. My boy Zab Zuda. What would a Q&A be without Zab Zuda? So Zab Zuda says, now that Baby Joker and the other member, I know he means Mateo, who the feds assigned to take out the state leadership is in PC, do you think it solidifies the state branch power as it shows they stood strong and the Fed loyal state NF members checked in? If so, why or why not? No, I don't. I'm sure that they feel a sense of victory for averting the bullet this time, but trust me, there's still an uneasy, lingering feeling that that fight's not over. To raise the victory flag now at this point in the game would be a huge mistake. Not even Conejo's that stupid. By the way, Mateo never checked in and isn't in PC. They just snatched him up and slammed him down because of what happened. But like I said in one of my other answers, the federal branch are not just going to stop pursuing their agenda until they prevail. This is not something that's going to dissipate or go away with time. They're going to continue to push that line for as long as they have air in their lungs. Because it's not just about entitlement, power, control, and money. They righteously feel like they're justified and that the rule of NF law is backing them. So Julio L wants to know, have you ever met anybody that wanted to become part of the NF but ended up changing their mind? If so, was there any consequences? Yes, I've seen this happen a few times, not only during the recruitment process of potential NF members, but also during the recruitment process of NR members. Not as much with potential NF candidates, but I have seen it happen. This is the whole purpose behind the 90-day probationary period, to give that individual ample opportunity to option out if he feels like it isn't for him. The probationary period is actually twofold. There's two defined purposes for it. During the 90-day probationary period, the potential prospect will function as if he is a made member of either the NF or the NR, whichever group it is he's trying to make a commitment to. Although his membership has yet to be officially sanctioned, he's going to be required to function as if he's an actual member. During this 90 days, they could be asked to do a number of things that actual members are obligated to do, such as participating in a removal, securing contraband, securing a weapon, posting up and keeping security on someone, etc., etc. Those are just a few of the basic fundamentals that I can think of off the top of my head. Also, schooling and the indoctrination process is something that all Norteños, NR members, and NF members are always involved in. This is an ongoing process that never stops. But during this 90 days, depending on whether you're dealing with an NR or an NF prospect, the curriculum will change. The topics will either be NF or NR related, such as the NF Constitution, the 14 bonds, the format, etc., etc. The training will be more intensive and will basically be the same topics actual members study. For NF prospects, the Constitution will be given out in sections that are not in order, and they'll only be privy to portions of it. This is how it was done when I was recruited. The bonds were regulated the same way before they began to get disseminated to all Northerners in the late 90s. Now, at the conclusion of the 90-day probationary period, this is when you're going to be evaluated by your sponsor, the C who actually raised his hand, and the one who recommended you for membership, and possibly another C with status. This is where you'll have an opportunity to either move forward with the recruitment process, or where you'll have an opportunity to opt out if that's what you want to do. If you decide that you want to opt out, that's your choice, and there won't be no consequences or adverse effects, period. Because me personally, when I recruited other NF members or NR members, I'd rather for them to be straight up with me and just say, you know what, B, I ain't ready. I don't want to set myself up for failure. So for right now, I'm good, man. I'm here for you guys if you need me, but for right now, I'm good where I'm at. I would rather for them to be honest and forthright about it instead of them moving forward just based on the fact that they feel pressure or like there might be consequences for opting out. So that's one of the reasons for the 90-day probationary period. Now, the other reason for this process is to give your sponsor and the C who's recommending you ample opportunity to evaluate you and to make sure that you fit the mold to even become an NF or an NR member. Because it's their responsibility to make sure that you're making the commitment for all the right reasons. They need to make sure that you're a true believer and that you're not just trying to acquire the title or the status. These are the individuals that we want to weed out and eliminate. Some of these guys just want to get made because they have family that are hooked up or homeboys from their hoods that are hooked up. Those are not the true believers. So again, to reiterate, there is no adverse effects or consequences if someone opts out and expresses that they're not ready. Because let's face it, that lifestyle is not for everyone. It's a lifestyle that comes with a lot of ominous sacrifices, especially the NF, where you're told that your fate is already set in stone. When I was recruited into the NF, MC from Salinas straight up told me, your destiny is already set. You're either going to spend the rest of your life in prison for working for the best interest of the organization, or you're going to die in the process. So TC wants to know, do you know a C from Salinas named Vincent Chente Garcia? And have you done an episode on him, or will you be doing one? Yes, I know Chente. I know him very well as we were recruited together. Myself, Chente, Rico, Lobo, all from Salinas, and Gerald also Winston from Santa Rosa, were all recruited together in San Quentin. I mentioned this in my book. Mike Yu and Big Smiley were on a recruiting campaign at that time. Their whole purpose was to recruit manpower specifically for the purpose of bolstering the Salinas regiment with new Cs. However, I was included in this class as SF also was lacking in NF manpower. As far as doing an episode on him, I'm going to be doing one on him and one on his co-defendant, Soldier Boy. In fact, it's going to be based on their case that was called Operation Snake Eyes. Ans B wants to know, man, you got to clear up the Michael Thompson interview. After researching, he is all over saying how he took out 7 NF members with knives, and then on and on after that, how he stalked and took out NF members at numerous times. Can you comment on these claims of the high-ranking AB dropout? Brother, listen. If it walks like a shit bug, talks like a shit bug, smells like a shit bug, then for all intents and purposes, my brother, it's definitely a shit bug. When I first heard those interviews, I lost all respect for the dude. He's killing his own legacy. Make no mistake about it. The dude was part of the brand's leadership and he was a killer. And he still is. But all that slick talk about dispatching 7 NF members and how he did it like a ninja is a bunch of horse feathers. It's a crock of shit. I think the only people dumb enough to believe that rhetoric were the two youngsters who were interviewing him and seemed to be captivated and intrigued with his nonsense. Those two cats were sitting on the edge of their seats, hanging on his every word. Straight lames. I'll tell you what it is, brother. Now that Thompson's out, he's looking for a book and a movie deal. That's why he's fabricating and embellishing his stories. He's hyping it up so someone will buy it and sign him. If he was gonna put the 2 on the 10, he should have at least made it believable. He might have been able to get away with maybe 2 or possibly even 3, which is still a long shot. But damn, at least he would have made it somewhat fathomable. He definitely watched Matrix one too many times. So Chico 559er wants to know, what helps to stay positive during lockup? I never done real time, but I stay dwelling on bad memories and want to be alone a lot. You got to think positive to be positive. You said you've never really done hard time before. I'm assuming you must be referring to either shoot time or long stretches. Time is time, brother. If you know what it feels like to lose your freedom and be taken away from your loved ones, then you know what it feels like to do time. I did almost all my time in the SHU, so I never really got to experience some of the luxuries that general population has to offer. But because I spent all my years in isolation, I had to learn how to keep my mind strong. I did this by doing a lot of reading, studying, and learning how to stay mentally conditioned. I was always trying to find different ways to keep my mind occupied. Pelican Bay was designed to break people. If you weren't mentally strong, it would swallow you up. I seen a lot of good dudes fall victim to some of the mental conditions that those types of environments create. PTSD, schizophrenia, depression, manic depressive, bipolar, high anxiety, paranoia. You become antisocial and or an introvert. Sounds like you're experiencing some of the residual effects that doing time had on you. Those are symptoms of being antisocial. I'm starting to sound like Dr. Phil right now, man. Whenever I started dwelling on negative things or negative memories, I used to just think of the positive things that I had to look forward to. My kids, my release date, how things could be so much worse, etc., etc. That's how I used to get myself out of a funk. When you're locked down, it's easy to allow yourself to fall into a depression or to dwell on the negatives because that's what you're surrounded by. But at least for me, I always used the positives to overshadow the negatives, and whenever I had too much idle time that started generating negative thoughts, I just make myself do something positive like writing a letter, drawing something, or even looking at my pictures. Looking at pictures of my kids or my loved ones always made me feel better, because when we're in there, our pictures are like our little windows to the outside world. I hope this helps. So Red Dog wants to know, do you think that it was wrong of you to ask Angel to do that dirty work for you at the apartment when you could have done it yourself? Or was it because you were a two-striker and he wasn't? This scenario made me think of how Corny and Pinky had you continue with your assignment knowing that the feds were on you. Man, I swear up and down I already answered this question, but it's such a toxic question that I'm just going to do it again anyway. Listen, brother. I don't mean to come across as being defensive or in any way disrespectful, but I've got to speak freely and give it to you exactly how I feel. First of all, are you serious? Let's not forget why Angel and Willow were there posted up at the apartment for in the first place. They were there for a purpose, to keep security on that apartment, and they had specific directives that they both failed to uphold. What about that? How come you're not asking about that? It just amazes me that after both of those brothers pissed on themselves and failed to respond like they should have, that the only thing that you're asking about is why I had Angel doing my dirty work. I don't even think I would put it in the context of doing dirty work. So according to what you're insinuating, it would have been okay for me to get into this shootout alone and then stay there and get rid of all the other contraband and guns while my girl was freaking out and while the cops were on the way. Come on, man, that doesn't even make sense. Me being the two-striker is not even the main issue. That's a moral issue that can be discussed after the fundamentals are addressed first. If I would have been one of those hardline type of C's that wanted to push the issue, I technically could have deemed both of them on the spot when they showed a blatant act of cowardice. Maybe you missed that, but let me say it again. These brothers were both told well ahead of time that they had an assignment or a clear directive. They were told that when those individuals came back, that they were both to come out with a weapon, and that one was to circle around to the back and the other was to circle around to the front. I told them to set up a two-way strike zone and that I had the front covered. When the bell rung, they did nothing. Nada. Nathan. They dummied up and put their best "what happened" face on. Considering that these brothers were both members of my regiment, that they were both NR members, and that they were both given clear instructions ahead of time, you don't see nothing wrong with that? I just don't understand your logic when you say I could have done it myself. I don't know if you've ever been in a shootout, but I've been in quite a few, and I don't know about you, but what do people usually do after they've been involved in a shootout? Fucking run. They get the fuck out of Dodge. Yeah, I guess I could have done it all myself. I guess I could have got into a shootout, grabbed all the money and dope, grabbed my lady while she was freaking out, cleaned the apartment, moved all the guns, flushed the dope, and then made a clean getaway. Laugh out loud. According to your analogy, if we were robbing a bank and during the course of running out of the bank, I accidentally dropped my gun fleeing from the cops, it would have been on me to go back and pick up my own gun. If he's coming out and he's in a position to pick up my gun and get rid of it, then why shouldn't he? As far as dirty work, in the world of the criminal element, we call this having each other's back. We call this looking out for each other and making sure the homie doesn't get caught slipping. I could give you 1,000 examples of dirty work, but that ain't one of them. As far as the thought that popped into your mind with regard to Corny and Pinky, those ain't even on the same playing field. The contrast is so different, it's not even something I would compare it to. On one hand, you have greed, throwing someone to the wolves while only thinking about your own selfish needs, throwing better judgment and principle to the wayside because they were only thinking about themselves. On the other hand, you have some brothers who clearly demonstrated an act of cowardice during an assignment they both agreed to, an assignment they were both obligated to. It wasn't about anybody being selfish or throwing them under the bus. It was about them trying to save me after I had just engaged in some type of criminal activity, something that could have gotten me life. So the short answer to your question, no, I don't think I could have done it myself. They did what they were supposed to do, and had the shoe been on the other foot, I would have done the same thing for either one of them. Could it have been that the Sioux, being mostly youngsters, they didn't really want to funk with someone on the level of an NF? I doubt that it had anything to do with them not wanting to funk with an NF member. If anything, I think this would have made them want to funk more, as this would have obviously given someone a golden opportunity to earn some real bones. Honestly though, I think they were just waiting for the right opportunity. It's not like I was there too long, and it's not like they became aware of my presence as soon as I moved in. I lived on Impala, which was the next street over from Cadillac, where they were all at. So it's not like they see me every day when I would come out of my apartment. As soon as the incident transpired the first time, when me and one of my boys got into it with them that first morning, the shootout happened about 5 days later. So things escalated pretty quick as soon as they definitively knew I was there. So Jackie Chan wants to know, what do you think the outcome will be for DC? Will he get a pass? Tapping in from 209. Honestly, it can go either way, and I think it just depends on how things end up playing out. If DC asserts himself deeper into the fray and clearly defines his position as being against the federal branch, then I think he'll go down when the rest of the ship goes down. But if DC continues to walk the line and play to both sides, I think he'll end up being okay. DC's old and he's been around for a long time, but he's not stupid by a long shot. The only thing that works to his disadvantage is that he's easily manipulated. He'll usually take the high road to avoid conflict, because like I've said before, he's non-confrontational. But in this situation where things have dragged on for so long and have become so volatile, he's susceptible to becoming a target with Conejo and Chuco. So Sean Collins wants to know, I wonder if the M has this much drama between the factions, aka state and feds. Don't think for 1 minute that the NF are any different when it comes to these kinds of nefarious politics. Trust me on that. They all have their internal rifts, petty conflicts, and situations that create high drama. The ABs went through it with the Nazi lowriders. The M had their internal conflicts when the Tupi and Topo conflict created separate factions, and the BGF had their drama when Kumi called for its own independence. And these are just a few of the incidents to name. Over the years, there have been many more. I will say this though, the NF has been more prone to internal conflict, and it's always shown that it's never had any qualms when it's come to preying on its own. 49er Giants wants to know, did you know Dino Madrid from SFM? He didn't want me to be with LNS, but we still busted on them 19th and Mission fools. Ever meet Casper from LNS? I went to high school with him. He was a savage. Yeah, I know Dino. I grew up with him. I also know Casper from LNS. I don't know what generation you're from, but I was out there before LNS was even born. Do you remember LTM, Little Time Mission? This is where we all started out before we graduated to SFM. If you remember LTM, then you should remember cats like Penguin, Poochie, Jaws, Chewy, Junior Marty, Tone Low, and his bro Playboy, AV, Babyface, Weasel, Pomo, and Bad Boy, just to name a few. So Racketeers wants to know, why was the NR disbanded? I've answered this question 1,000 times. In short order, the NR was disbanded for a couple reasons. But the main reason was because Poison had infiltrated the ranks, and a select few rogue members had begun to use their influence into leading the group astray. Certain NR members, such as DK from Salinas, Pee Wee from Gilroy, and a few others began advocating for the NR's independence. These individuals felt like they had established their own right within the movement, and that they no longer felt like they should be obligated to follow the dictates of the NF. This created a huge power struggle, and we felt like we were losing control of the NR. When this first developed, our plan of action consisted of whacking all those NR members who were the catalysts or who were attempting to lead the movement in the wrong direction. But after about a year of targeting these individuals, we realized that the poison had spread too far. Our next course of action was to just pull the plug, disband the movement, and then reestablish control over the whole group. CDC was also on a statewide validation expedition, so we felt that if we disbanded the NR and leaked it out, that this would skirt the validation crusade CDC was on, and thus curtail a lot more brothers from getting thrown in the shoe. That's the short version. So SR wants to know, did the NF ever put out a mandate to the Norteño street gangs to stop drive-by shootings on other Norteños and to stop the red on red? Yes, sometime around 1997, 1998, around the time the NR was disbanded, a general who was appointed to fill the position on an interim basis, Gerald Cuete Rubalcaba from Tulare County, sent out mandates to the street that covered a multitude of issues. One of those issues was to cease all red-on-red conflict. This mandate was known as El Norte Law. Aside from addressing the red-on-red conflict, it also encouraged all Norteños to begin cleaning the streets for the invasion of the Sureño street gang members in Northern California that he felt we were all responsible for. Cuete felt like we had all allowed these gangs to migrate and set up shop without any resistance whatsoever. This mandate correlated with the GUN rap album that also encouraged all Norteños to rise up and begin attacking these guys. The last part of the mandate involved elevating the expectations of the regular non-affiliated street gang Norteños, basically the guys who weren't committed to either the NR or the NF. Cuete felt like these guys should be held to a higher standard and that the days of the NF and NR leading the charge alone was long over. What it all came down to was imposing the NF will on these guys, which basically just resulted in a lot of good ends walking away. So Got It wants to know, what do you do in your spare time now? Also, can you explain how the bad news list works? Who keeps a copy of it and how does it work? Spare time? Shit, what spare time? I work, I do this YouTube stuff, I work out every day, and lately I've been trying to finish my second book. Trust me, there ain't enough hours in a day. YouTube has been slowing me down, but I've been slowly trudging along. As far as the BNL, Bad News List, or the NGN list, No Good Norteños list, multiple copies are kept. Every household, county jail, prison, or street regiment should always maintain an updated copy. I'll be honest though, there's so many dudes falling into bad standings or dropping out that it's literally impossible to keep up with the updates. Pelican Bay keeps a master copy, and the GOP and the SRG are the ones responsible for making sure that they're constantly being updated. Every county jail also keeps a copy of a BNL so that it can screen all those that come into custody. Prisons run the same screening process. I'm sure you know how that works, right? So whenever an NR member, or even an NF member enter an establishment like a county jail, they have to go through what's called a screening process. This consists of gathering all their vitals, collecting any and all information from the manpower on this new arrival, and then his name is ran through the BNL to see if he's on it. If he's not on the BNL and nothing negative comes back from the manpower, then he's cleared and embraced by the household. I'm sure I'm probably skipping over something, but this is the quick short version. I hope you guys have enjoyed this Q&A. Like I said before, as long as you guys continue to submit the questions, I'll keep doing them, and I'll make a point to do at least one a week. Also, some of you have continued to ask where you can purchase my book. You can find it on Amazon. Just plug in the title, Nuestra Familia Broken Paradigm, and it'll come up. And again, for those of you who keep asking where to submit the questions can be submitted in any comment section on the channel. If they're there, we'll find them. So keep the questions coming. And like always, thank you all for supporting the channel.